Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And here's another solo album review of the newest project from the 1975, Being Funny in a Foreign Language. So here's a fun question. What makes the 1975 a good or even a great band? And I don't think that's as easy of a question as some folks will make it out to be, especially those who only came around in 2018 with the wildly overrated A Brief Inquiry into Online Relationships, where a lot of the critics fell in love, but some of us have been around much earlier, going back to when I reviewed their self-titled album back in 2013 near the beginning of this channel. I did not expect to be as ahead of the curve on this band as I wound up, as they wrote tremendously groovy, hook-driven indie pop rock with the sort of flair and personality that actually set them apart of the UK buzz bands of that era that came and went. It also helped that the 1975 are pretty ambitious, with consistently solid production and a great live presence, so even if their material felt kind of vacuous or very obviously derivative or even a little bit insufferable, as Matt Healy is the sort of frontman where you might understand the sex appeal up until he opens his mouth, I mean, it was so well presented, it was hard to get all that angry about it, at least for those first two albums. But then came A Brief Inquiry into Online Relationships in 2018, and the much-delayed 2020 follow-up, Notes on a Conditional Form, where it seemed like all the critics snapped awake and realized that this band just delivered two bloated, increasingly incoherent albums, where not only did it feel pretentious to the point of comedy, but the tighter compositions were feeling increasingly scarce. The band was getting away from their strengths in favor of some big ideas that they could not back up, and a brand of ironic deconstruction that lacked focus, targets, or any real punch. And while a surprising amount of it still plays well live, I should know, I saw them in 2019, you could also tell they were starting to test everyone's patience, especially as their sound got increasingly soupy, commodified, or just ripped off, or maybe just overexposed. Matt Healy was producing for a lot of people around that time. So in a way, going back to what works, that makes sense. Streamline the project, make it a tight 11 songs, around 40 minutes. Maybe stick with the 80s flair and the deconstructive edge so you can constantly walk the line between a lot of earnest swell and then winking at all of it. Pulling in Jack Antonoff for production almost feels too obvious at that point. Hell, maybe pull back on some of the electronic experiments that never quite paid off the way they should have, and with the festivals now back in full swing, just hammer out another crowd-pleasing set. And really, given how badly Dirty Hit seems to have mismanaged every act on that label, this is the one band, the one formula that seems set up to really win. So do we have another stadium-ready smash? Oh... Well, not exactly. Let me get the easy assessment out of the way, the TLDR. It's the best album from the 1975 since I Like It When You Sleep, mostly coming through a soft focus embrace of some jaunty mid to late 80s pop rock and new wave, perhaps not as anthemic or rock-driven as they've been in their best, but certainly they're best equipped to ship a whole pile of songs to alternative radio. This should play if marketed well, but it's also a weirdly hollow blur of gauzy, waspy mirrors that are openly cribbing ideas from Bleachers, that last Vampire Weekend album, Father John Misty, even Bon Iver, where it leaps across levels of irony, where every aching note of sincerity is juxtaposed with a piss take, and where even the fans who have given Matt Healy's writing a pass on previous albums, they seem kinda done with him here. More than anything, it feels like an overcorrection, like Matt Healy listened to all the scathing words said around their last two albums and tried to find a sound that would work, and he wound up with something that certainly has moments, but not exactly those that get to what made the 1975 great at their best, which is why I think this is good, but I'm left weirdly unsatisfied. And I feel like I really have to start with the concept and themes that are lurking behind this album, because for as much as the 1975 have woven continuity and internal references across their albums, it's part of their branding, it's what makes them so effective, this is by far their most self-referential to date, with even I'm in Love With You and About You both functioning as continuations of older songs by the 1975, those being A Change of Heart and Robbers respectively. But that's just the surface level, the Easter eggs. This is an album that is intensely self-aware about the criticism and the framing of the 1975, especially online. And it's not so much addressing those critiques directly, so much as living in the aftermath. In some moments, defiantly playing up the band's white bread pomposity to points where you just know it's gotta be a parody or on some level ironic. This is why I started off with the Father John Misty comparison, where it's clearly trying to be over the top and funny, but also have some pathos along the way, maybe some notes of truth, whether or not you're in on the joke or not. And that can be a really tricky line to walk. Although, to give Matt Healy credit, I do think he does it a little better than some will acknowledge. And that is to say, for as many points as the writing seems like it's going wildly off the rails, it often works more often than you might think, mostly as a reflection of the obvious stylized phoniness that a certain stripe of celebrity and influencer puts up online, overloaded with hypocrisy. I mean, the title track, it's a swirl of contradictions, like making an aesthetic out of not doing well. In other words, calling out those who want to dance with the common people, and he's including himself, consistently fumbling as a recovering addict, very much caught up in that swirling glamour that can come in that scene. Then there's the leadoff single, Part of the Band. Horrible choice for a leadoff single, by the way. And yes, as much as it is groan-worthy to see someone bitch about their cancellations with a hand on his dick, it is a side of that experience that feels weirdly authentic to someone who is riding on a cocktail of drugs and ego and is now crashing down to earth in all the ugliness of that reality. And this is not letting the 1975 off the hook here. Human 2, especially in the presentation and framing, feels really petulant with all the weak excuses. It's just insufferable. But I'm not too proud to admit that I kinda get the emotional appeal. It's certainly better than when some bands try to play the whole ironic fuck-up where it's not really that ironic. And this is where the Vampire Weekend side of the conversation comes into play, where for as much as the band has danced around conversations of privilege and capital, there's at least the implication they might be trying to say something about that environment that might not be all that positive, of which by playing up certain elements of their persona, the 1975 are also trying to do. Hell, one of the most stark examples is Looking for Somebody to Love, where against a jaunty Huey Lewis / Bruce Springsteen homage, we got a song from the perspective of a school shooter, which pushes the whole ironic, pumped up Kicks homage right to the edge, but does say something about how a certain white bread brand of machismo can play into this dark joke, where there is a grain of truth to the whole hero fantasy at the core. Oh, Carolyn is working the same overly clingy, desperate angle, with the same navel-gazing of happiness. But I think the most revealing line on the entire album comes on All I Need to Hear, which takes the waltz cadence and the old-fashioned romanticism and matches it with the line, I don't care if you're insincere. And that's kind of the secret appeal of this band, of this album. There is a performativity that comes with this brand of stylized romance, but if the performance is good enough, who cares? Folks will believe. Well, okay, here's a problem. Regardless of what level of irony you're riding in on, eventually you've got to come to realize that it's deflection away from very true emotions, that what you actually believe and the implications that come with it. Josh Tillman, aka Father John Misty, got around all of that by embracing the darkness, no matter how pathetic it's made him look. Look at the album from this year. Whereas Ezra Koenig kind of danced around it, and Matt Healy's somewhere in the middle. I referenced Pumped Up Kicks before, and while Looking for Somebody to Love is a better song in my opinion, it's an ironic juxtaposition that reflects a lot of Matt Healy's distance from the issue. I can understand why some might find it in bad taste. He might expose his ugliest side on Part of the Band, but that third verse where he goes after the vaccinista, tote bag chic baristas, the folks who have commodified a certain left-wing aesthetic while embracing little of the activism, even though that predominantly liberal group exists, it's less about engaging with the political conversation around them and more mockery because of their presumed hypocrisy. 'Cause we're all human, right? I mean, that's the trick. This album wants to embrace the whole everyone's a fuck-up framing and thus find some community within that, but it stops well short of engaging with why that might be. Wintering, prime example, with the assortment of family figures, clashing ideas, but he's not there to argue, he is there to enjoy the holidays. because he can. I mean, compare this to Champagne Problems, one of Taylor Swift's best ever songs, because she saw so easily how she could fit into that moneyed privileged system, and around the holidays no less, and she took the loss. She bolted, she left it all behind because she can't live within that. Apparently Matt Healy can. I mean, the subtext around women's skates in this murky territory as well. And while I'm going to avoid any tabloid conversations about the FKA Twigs side of all this is an album that kind of needed that feminine voice to break through Matt Healy's tragicomic himbo energy, which feels less dishonest, more unbalanced, especially by the closing track, which leaves the whole will they, won't they romantic scene open-ended. I don't know, you kind of need another voice to cut into that a bit. Of course, some of this balance conversation has to come with the production, and yeah, let me state it right out of the gate, as much as I might want the 1975 to embrace those ragged rock edges from their debut, give these mixes a little more teeth, that was nearly 10 years ago, and as much as I appreciate the callback on About You, thanks to Warren Ellis's string arrangement, we weren't gonna get much more. And you know what, for a producer for hire, for this sound, Jack Antonoff's actually a pretty good choice. He's got a long-running fondness for this era of Americana, which is clearly touching the warmer folk pop moments on this album's back half, as well as the slick, slightly ramshackle earnestness to a lot of these new wave throwbacks. Yeah, Matt Healy is also singing with more of a higher register soft touch and a bit less power, but as a whole, the melodic hooks tend to be pretty damn strong. The grooves are there, provided you're not sick to death of this sound in indie pop. But even if you are, this is at least a better balanced and produced version of it that's aware of how you can use these elements to play out the subversion. The title track follows up an LCD Sound System keyboard sample. That's a nice secondary callback. The jaunty light jazz touches of happiness with the horns, the killer bass line, and the more textured percussion, it's got endless throwback charm. Looking for somebody, again, the most obvious 80s Bleachers, Springsteen, Huey Lewis flip that the 1975 have ever attempted. And hell, Oh Carolyn feels like the best song that Lionel Richie never cut. It's honestly really nice, and it's a good flip. But this is where Jack Antonoff comes into play as a producer. And this is a problem that I and a few of my colleagues have been noticing and starting to point out across a number of different productions of his in recent years, spanning different artists, even different engineering teams. For as much as Jack Antonoff lets a mix breathe, feel very airy and textured and big, balancing out the truly beautiful with some rougher patter, there's this weird sense of emptiness in some of his productions that just starts to feel kind of uncanny, like there should be something there. I can argue this goes far back at least to like Lana Del Rey's Norman fucking Rockwell, but it really snapped into focus in 2021 with Solar Power by Lorde, that last Bleachers album, and especially the 10-minute version of All Too Well by Taylor Swift. A feeling where there should be more melody or a solo or something more explosive to fill up that space, and it's just not there. Made all the more jarring by the fact that the 1975 have actually dabbled into ambient music and have done a pretty striking job filling up that space in the past, even on the albums that I don't think are all that good. Whereas here, with the clattering instrumental interludes with some half-heard snippets of audio chatter and glistening flickers, that space is all the more obvious, and it doesn't play to ironic subversion that well. The 1975 have used that space to yearn before, and it seems played in a similar way here, which on the one hand helps certain moments feel very sincere, very genuine, very heartfelt. But when paired with writing that's trying for more layers and deconstruction, the emotionality, I don't know, it feels less earned this time. And that's when I kept circling back to that word, overcorrection. The 1975 got called out for their albums being bloated and lacking structure and soaked in a lot of electronica, so let's strip all that away for their most organic feeling album to date, and Jack Antonoff come in here, tighten the compositions, even if that comes with choices in the production that don't always flatter the band's strengths, yet again. Matt Healy then got called out for, well, frankly, a string of stupid bullshit online that I really do not have the patience to untangle, and a lot of which is his fault. So he leans into some of that negativity, drive the naysayers away, and wins over the diehards with the sentimentality, and the critics with something closer to what they say they want. And since Dirty Hit has been fumbling consistently with a roster of would-be smash acts, the 1975, they have to deliver. And I don't know, I just hear the calculations running here. I know pandering of a certain stripe when I hear it. I'm not saying this is bad. In fact, in many ways, it is quite good, with a smattering of strong hooks and smarter writing than the band will be given credit because of how friggin' out there it is, streamlined into their tightest project in years. But for a band that used to swing for the fences, this is a single, a double at best. And it lacks that sense of scale, and that often happens when you circle the wagons and strip mine your own mythology. A well-told joke, but one we've heard, and not one that cuts deeper. So, I don't know, call it for the fans more than anyone. It's good enough for it. I just won't call it great. I'll leave it there. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I would be extremely grateful. I know I went off long on this one. It turns out I had a lot to say, and given my rather contentious opinions on this band, I can only imagine how it's all going to be received. Comments are down there. Have fun. Beyond that, though, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. If you guys want to get involved in maybe helping support the channel, getting albums onto my schedule, maybe just arguing with me directly on my Discord, well, the option to support the channel, I've got my merch down in the description below. And hell, if you guys want to subscribe and help boost the channel, we want to get to 43,000, that'd be pretty sweet. But yeah, link to my Patreon is right over there. You don't have to feel obligated, tough times, I understand, but the option is available. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.